53-man roster is just about ready to be set here next week, Tuesday at 4 p.m. All teams need to get their rosters cut down to 53. And I wanted to talk about a player, actually an entire room, that the Lions have really had some trouble with this season, just trying to figure out who is actually going to step up. And that is the wide receiver room. So let's bring it all the way back to kind of where it started this season. And Dan Campbell had some big praise for Jameson Williams and the progress that he's made this season, saying, this was after the May 23 practice, that the speedy receiver is the team's most improved player. Now, this came as a shock to some, but not as a big of a shock for many others. And to really get things started this spring, Dan Campbell had high praise for J-Mo again, where he was quoted as saying this: "We started this back in spring, back in April, and you've got phase 1 for a couple of weeks. And then we've been on grass for 3 weeks in phase 2, which has been routes on air and fundamentals and individual and doing all this. And then we are 2 practices in, and if you said, give me one player that is most improved from start to finish in that time, J-Mo would be that guy right now. He is a man on a mission, and I'm just going to leave it at that. All right? I'm going to leave it at that." Well, he left it at that, but J-Mo didn't. J-Mo kept working his ass off all offseason, all spring training, and summer training camp long. And after missing the first 4 games of the 2023 season while serving his gambling suspension, Williams kind of got off to a shaky start last season. He had a ton of drop balls, a few lost balls in the air on long routes. But then he came, he kind of came on sort of late in the season, the last 3, 4, 5 games, or he made 11 catches, 159 yards over the final regular season, 3 games in the regular season. And then he took on an even bigger role in the playoffs, which, again, I think it did surprise a few people. Scored 2 touchdowns in the NFC Championship game, got us off and rolling right away, helped build that lead in the first half. What we have been missing from J-Mo, it really seemed to finally wake up in him. Like, he finally started to put things together. The Lions have really been looking in-house, though, for the next big contributor to this offense. They lost Jared Goff's safety net in free agency when Josh Reynolds signed with the Broncos on what was a 2-year deal worth as much as $14 million. It is clear that the Lions did not feel that Reynolds was worth it, or maybe they never really had a chance to negotiate, as Reynolds' camp had said during the same time that the negativity surrounding the NFC Championship game for Reynolds was enough for Reynolds to not be back with the team. And since his departure, the Lions have really been begging anyone, to step up and take that eventual 4th and 5th spot on this roster. With the receiver room still looking for, those final pieces and someone to step up, I wouldn't put it past the Lions to add a 6th receiver after cuts, or maybe they even just keep a 6th receiver on the initial 53-man roster. Now, over the last couple of seasons, the Lions generally have kept 5 receivers on the 53-man roster. Last season, they kind of had 6 because Jameson Williams was suspended. Now, the Lions still have the chance to add an even more accomplished veteran, in my opinion, to help fill this void, or to find somebody that they know that will be able to at least contribute a little bit, and one that may not add a big guarantee to make an immediate impact on this team, but could be very helpful, a seasoned addition to this team that should offer, the Lions something, should they suffer any sort of injury, major or short-term injury, throughout the season. And that player is none other than Michael Thomas. Now, Thomas was predicted to end up a Detroit Lion back in 2022 by a vast majority of outlets in what would have been an eventual trade with the Saints. Given the history there between the 2 coaches, obviously didn't happen. But if it did, I wonder how much Thomas could have avoided injury-wise to his career. Because the last 3 seasons for Thomas have really been marred by injury, and a lot of them. He has suffered a pedal ankle or a pedal toe injury on 3 separate occasions, all in the grade 3 category over the last few seasons. In 2022, Thomas landed on IR by week 9. And last season, in 2023, he suffered a grade 2 sprained MCL, effectively ending his season in the first drive of week 10. So he's really done by week 10. And last season, again, Frank Ragnow suffered a very similar sprain to his knee in the week leading up to the NFC Championship game during the divisional round. But he continued to play. Obviously, Thomas had other concerns. Now, Thomas did sign a restructured deal with the Saints this last season in 2023, which was a 1-year kind of what I call a departure contract. and it was worth $10 million. His value and his current market for his services really have not been overwhelming this year. The former NFL Offensive Player of the Year and two-time All-Pro fell off after a series of complicated injuries and frustrating surgeries interrupted what looked like a Hall of Fame-worthy career. But doesn't this sound like a Brad Holmes deal of a century and style of opportunity that he likes to get all mixed up in? It certainly does to me. One that maybe has a lot more upside than it would downside if it should work out. He does carry an overlap with Dan Campbell and Aaron Glenn, among others on this Lions team, as far as relationships. So the relationship is there. And the Lions know this player. To quote Brad Holmes, he must know these players. So now, I'm not saying that, to always bring in these Dollar General bargain bin players and, wheel it in off the street and kind of pick and choose what you're looking for. I'm not saying that at all, but sometimes it does make sense. And when you're looking at a roster that would be very difficult to get targets after the second receiver anyway, let alone the fourth or the fifth spot, really? Does it really matter who you bring in? And who are you going to have on this roster that can step up if something does go down late in the season? Thomas is still relatively young, even though he's 31 years old. And the reason why I say that is because he's coming off another season-ending injury in which, he chalks up a bad ball from Derek Carr as the reason why he went down last season. But he's only been available for 13 of the last 51 games that the Saints played since 2020. That's why I'm saying he's relatively young. He doesn't have all the mileage that most players would have in a 7 to 9 year career. He's only been available, like I said, 13 of 51 games since 2020. Now, this is when his ankle was painfully rolled up on while he was blocking downfield in what was a blowout win. Some would question why he was even out there at all, period. Obviously, that situation started his decline. Thomas played through the injury, though, to support Drew Brees in his last year before retirement, but he was forced to miss the entire 2021 season due to recovering from surgery on the leg. Now, he went down with another injury 3 games into 2022 and then was sidelined for the last 7 games of 2023. Now, last season, Thomas played in 9 games in one series in which in week 10 with 39 receptions and 448 yards on the season. Not a terrible year, obviously a shortened season, but he was well, on his way to having a pretty decent year. Now, with an average of 4.3 catches per game and 49 yards, he would have finished better than what the Lions had all last season as far as from, production standpoint from our number 3 receiver on down. He would have been on pace to finish as the number 2 receiver on the Lions depth chart behind Amon-Ra St. Brown. There isn't another free agent with his credentials. There just isn't. But that injury history and his public criticism of his coach and quarterback and team training facility and staff may have cooled interest a bit, so to speak. Otherwise, maybe he wouldn't still be on the open market. Now, I wanted to go a little bit sideways with this and compare him to a player that's kind of gone through a similar situation. So I'm going to compare him and his injury history to none other than the Odell Beckhams of the NFL. So like Thomas, he's 31 years old, Odell Beckham, and a 3-time Pro Bowler, with a pair of All-Pro nods and an Offensive Rookie of the Year award to his name. He's also caught 566 passes in his career compared to 565 for Michael Thomas. Now, it is 27 more games, though, that it took Odell Beckham to do that, and 4 different teams. Now, Beckham has twice suffered serious knee injuries and tearing his ACL. The second time happened in Super Bowl, or in the last Super Bowl that he was in, causing him to miss subsequent 2022 season in recovery. Now, or miss the subsequent 22 season in recovery. Now, Beckham didn't sign with the team until well after the start of free agency in 2023. Signing with the Ravens, he posted in a modest 35 catches, 565 yards, and 3 TDs on the season. Now, you compare that to what Thomas posted with the Saints, which is 39 receptions, 448 yards, and a single touchdown. And then Beckham went on to sign with the Miami Dolphins this offseason in 2024. So I guess the question is, does this mean that Thomas may have to sit out 2024 or should sit out 2024 before he decides to sign with a team like Beckham did? I don't think so. I don't think that that's the answer. I think that Beckham did that for various reasons. He wanted to get back into, playing shape, obviously have an opportunity to play, signed a short 1-year deal, made some cash and got out. Now, we don't know how far along Thomas is in his recovery from last year's injury. But what I would say is that it was never expected for Thomas to kind of stay on ice for multiple seasons. We may not see any movement, though, anytime soon, or at least until after training camp is finished, which it has, and the 53-man cuts have concluded, or even halfway through the season, it could be. Should the Lions need help, or, Thomas feels he can win a ring in Detroit? Well, maybe Thomas is just being a little bit more selective right now. The question is, though, what is it going to cost? What is it going to cost to bring Thomas in? He made $10 million in his last season with the Saints. He's coming off another injury where, let's just face it, these are not small injuries, and multiple of them that he's had to face over the last 3-4 seasons. I would say that you could probably get Thomas on a single season deal. If it's a half a season, probably $4 million. A full season, probably $7 million. Maybe a 2-year deal, right around $15-16 million. At any cost, the Lions have the money. They have the cap space, and they need a guy that can be there to at least be a decoy. With Michael Thomas in the game, who's not going to pay attention to him? I think it's a good fit. I just don't know where he is in his recovery at this time, and that is the only question mark. So will the Lions be adding on to this room via free agency, and is Michael Thomas a good fit? You tell me in the comments below. Is this a completely crazy thought that Michael Thomas would join the Lions and help us get to what is an eventual Super Bowl appearance this season? And will he be able to contribute? Or is it a foregone conclusion that Michael Thomas is probably going to sit out 2024, and, well, the Lions are just going to have to look and see who's available next week after cuts? You guys let me know in the comments below, and we'll see you here back on Rock the Detroit Lions in the next one. Take care. Have a great day. Go One Pride. Go Detroit Lions. Take care.